Thanks for sticking with me in this in this crazy in this crazy coding world. Last time we did last time we did blackjack. So this time we're gonna do poker, which is gonna be a lot more complicated, honestly. So where's the poker? There you go. It took a while to show up. Am I right, folks? Let's see here. So I could probably use like the same basic outline as last time. Like create a class called poker. Down here, poker.new. Up here, def initialize. Get that constructor. But this time, the difference between poker and blackjack is, for me at least, in my coding career, blackjack is something that I was able to do like instantly, whereas poker, I think it would be difficult for like, a beginner to do it because there's a lot of moving parts. Let's see. So I'm trying to think now how to structure the cards. And previously, what I had done was something like this for two of spades, three of spades, but I feel like it would be better if I did a card that had two attributes. And def initialize. Hmm. Yeah, I needed the attribute accessor. These are the getter and setter functions that are a lot. Why should I use getters and setters? This is actually, I took a test recently from one of these test companies and said, why use getters and setters? And I think the advantage is supposed to be it makes, everything's a duck type, right? Like read the book Object-Oriented Programming by Sandy Metz, and then duck typing means that everything within a class should be agnostic to everything that happens outside of the class. So, accessors are evil. Huh. That doesn't really answer my question. What is the advantage of using getters and setters? I might cut this, I guess it just gives you more control over. I mean, you can potentially change them later, and it gives you more control over which scopes have access to the variable. Let's see, so value and suit. Is value the right name for it? Which card do you have? It's a 2. Yeah. Maybe card value. No, just value is fine. Value equals value. Suit equals suit. And So the advantage of this is that we can access, is that we don't have to do any of this kind of like primitive like splicing of the card. We can just access it with like card.value or card.suit, which looks a lot better than like deck, then card of 0 and card of 1, which is what it would be if it were like that. Like that's a lot more clear than this, so that's why we're doing that. So let's see. And then this is like a sanity check. So it did instantiate the card, but you can't look at what it has. There you go, without inspect. Okay, cool. Yeah, so actually we can write a loop that is gonna create all of the cards for us. Actually, it would be 2 loops. So, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Use single quotes unless interpolating in strings. Never forget queen, king, and ace. And then we need hearts, spades, clubs, and diamonds. So yeah, I mean this is just easier to read than any kind of shorthand. And if you're writing code in 2019, there's never any reason to use shorthand for your variables. You can always write like a really long descriptive variable name for any variable or method. So that's a lot better than doing like 2s, 2a. So now I'm going to iterate over each of these. .each do. The .each doesn't look right. I don't know if it's going to work. No, it did work. Let's see here. So now we take this and we put this loop inside. Deck is an array that's empty, and then deck.push card.new of card value and then suit. And then that's going to iterate over each value for each of the suits and then put all of the cards in. And then I think there's even a function called shuffle in Ruby. Yeah. That's handy and very, very deck oriented. So deck.shuffle. And then the bang changes it in place. Otherwise it might not modify it, and then you would have to do deck equals deck.shuffle. But if you do a bang, then it does that automatically. Cool, so now we've got a shuffled deck, and that is a good place to start. So how does poker work? You can do if you leave out the betting, you could do Texas Hold'em, And then you can also do 5-card stud. So, I think Texas Hold'em, like, I remember Texas Hold'em becoming popular in like 2001. I think 9/11 really popularized Texas Hold'em. And I don't think anyone played any other kind of poker ever again, because I think Texas Hold'em is probably more strategically interesting because you're able to guess like what the other players might have because some of the information is public. But I'm just going to do 5-card stud. Um, so in 5-card stud, I think there's one. I think it's called draw, which is where you're able to give back some of your cards to try to get better cards. And then there's also hold. And then after that, you score the two hands against each other. So you've got the deck. You want to give the deck to each of the two players. I could create like a variable amount of players. I'm going to create a player class. Let's go crazy on all of these unnecessary. Well, they're not unnecessary. I think they're good style. So hand and hand equals hand. And then the player method is going to have, I think I need to do both of these inside of poker so that they have access to the class variable of the parent scope. Pretty sure. It works that way. Yeah. Oh, that's inheritance. Well, let's just see what happens. So class card, player new, and then puts deck.inspect. So we're going to do player new, and then that. Long number of arguments. Nil. Yeah, so you actually don't have access to the parent scope. So that means the player doesn't have access to the deck unless we pass the deck as a variable or as an argument to the player, and I don't think that's really necessary. So I guess it was an interesting experiment to see. It's kind of naive of me to think that it would have access to that variable, honestly. Oh, whatever. Let's just kill the player. So player one hand equals. Let's just call it player and dealer. Player hand equals deck dot take 5, and then dealer hand deck. And then we should probably shuffle the deck in between. So puts player hand dot inspect and dealer hand dot inspect. The inspect is necessary to see the instance variables inside. So yeah, there you go. Yeah, so that looks like the beginning of a poker game. But they shouldn't be able to see the dealer hand anyway, so puts. And then you should make like a pretty print method for the hand. Um, so let's make a hand class. When I say a pretty print method, I mean, you know, all of these like symbols here, they don't look very good. So you just want to print them out in like a better way. So my coding instructor, she always said pretty dumps. She said when you dump your SQL results, you want to have a pretty dump. And she thought the concept of a pretty dump was so funny. She was always talking about you want pretty dumps. Use the pretty dumps library. It was some PHP. Oh man, PHP. So where are we at? Uh, looks like I was able to print the player hand, but then we have draw, hold, score, and then so well the game is not over. I was gonna make a pretty print. Show hand. It's pretty simple. Oh. Let's see. So of and then soup. Then we don't have to do a puts anymore down here. We can just do syntax error. Undefined method show hand. Oh, okay, there we go. We're still using an array for the hands. Not good. And then infinite loop. Oh. Oh man, I made some very bad mistakes there. Oh, we didn't put the attribute accessor in. Yeah, the attribute accessor. The instance variables aren't accessible outside of the class without the attribute accessor. What if I'm saying that word right? No, but that's the verb. It's not the noun.
Attribute.
Attribute. There you go. Let's see. So I got the pretty print, but it didn't work. Okay, it worked. And now here, we're stuck in an infinite loop because of that. So, I should capitalize these, it'll look better. So now we want to put some kind of draw function in. And now the question is, where do we put the draw function? Because the draw function needs to have access to both the hand and the deck. So also the player needs to choose the specific cards that they want to give up. So, and then there should probably be some kind of validation to make sure that they can give up those cards. So I think it would be kind of annoying to type Jack of Hearts. And there's so much depth that you can put into any one of these games, even for just like a terminal game like this, to improve the user experience. Like we would be able to, for example, undo the selection of the card that they want. Like, oh, I didn't mean Jack of Hearts. But I think it would be best to just assign each one of them a number. Probably even just the index in the array. Am I right? Um, Normally you don't show non-programmers a zero-indexed array, but I think it would be safe to just go with the zero index. You would be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But yeah, we can just do 0 through 4. So yeah, I'm still not sure where to put the draw function. And the draw function would only apply to the player, so I'll just put it in the poker class, def draw. And then there needs to be, kind of like a user input here. So, number of new cards equals gets.chomp puts how many cards do you want to give up? And then there would be another one. Count equals 0, and then the count is less than number of new cards. Cards to give up. Oh man, this is getting complicated. That should be an empty array. So the question is whether we should do that by index or value to display a running total, like, you are giving up the Jack of cards. Jack of hearts. You have 2 cards left to give up. Which cards do you want to give up? But I think that's too much overhead. So I'm just going to make it not user-friendly and not provide that running value. So I have to do each with index. Yeah, it works the way I thought it did. So each with index, card, index, and here interpolate index. It's a weird color because it's like a reserved word. So we take the player hand, dot show a hand for draw, then we do another discard, and then cards to give up, dot push discard. We could probably store that as an instance variable on the hand. So yeah, so that'll store them in the player hand, and then there should be like a finish discard that takes them out of the hand. Oh man, it's just so hard when the hand doesn't have access to the deck, you know? But the deck needs to be shared between the two hands. Also, it's not really fair to give the player a draw and then the computer doesn't take a draw. And I have no idea like how I would write the logic. I mean, I guess it would be possible to write the logic like if the computer has like, if they have two of a kind, they're going to go for three of a kind. So they're just going to discard unmatched cards to try to get new cards. So if the card is matched as part of a hand, then they are going to not get rid of it, but otherwise they'll get rid of it. And let's just you're passing the control back and forth in between these two, in between this draw poker.draw function and in between the hand function so much that it just seems like a waste. Like just keep it in one place. So cards to give up, push card, and then when they're done with that loop, they're going to have all of the cards. Then we can do a finish discard, finish draw, and then here we're going to have cards and then deck. Remove element from array by index Ruby. There you go. Not using that anymore. Then just do a loop. Uh-oh. Lost this guy from the clipboard. Delete at index Ruby. Then you add the same number of cards to the hand. I'm looking this up because we don't want to wind up with a two-dimensional array, but you just add them. Okay, so we could just call show hand again. Cool. So stand or draw. Cody the Coder, back at it. Time to get back in the saddle. Finish up this poker. Let's see. User input equals draw, initiate, draw function, end. So let's see. So I'm going to have to call the finish draw function. Cards to discard. Call the cards to give up down here. I'm not sure if you want the variables to be the same. I think you do want the variables to be the same, even if they are in different scopes that way. Which one do we like better, gang? Do we like cards to give up or cards to discard? We discard. There we go. So now cards to discard, and then the deck. We have access to it down here because it's an instance variable. And now player handout, finish draw. And then we should just print the player hand again. Player hand, show hand. Okay, cool. So they only get to draw one time. It's poker, you know? So I guess we don't need the while loop at all. So I was using that pattern from the blackjack, and turn that into a one-line if. It looks better. Yeah. So I think it's ready to be tested. Let's see here. So what do we got? 4, 5, 6. Should we go for the straight? Or a flush? No. Yeah, I mean, going for the straight is really a long shot, but I feel like we should try to do it anyway. Comparison of fixed num with string. Let's see, so line 62. Oh. So we have to convert that one to an integer, because when it goes in, it's the string 2. We just have to convert it to an integer, because you can't compare a string with an integer. Okay, Jack, King, Queen. Man, I mean, it just, what are the odds of you getting the straight? It's like infinitesimal. Should we go for the straight? It doesn't really matter. I mean, it's just an academic exercise. So let's give up the 7 and hope we get Jack, Queen, King. I think it would. Oh well. So let's give up the 7. Draw. Undefined local variable card. Dang. So 73 and then 53. So it's in draw. Oh yeah. That's just kind of a dumb error. Oops, that was also, that's a dumb error too. Oh my gosh, I got it straight. Dang. I mean, look at that. Ace 2, 3, 4. Okay, so let's do more like a tester and less like someone trying to play the game. In draw, undefined method push for no class. Oh. It wasn't, we declared it as an instance variable, but it's just a local variable. Undefined method each for nil class. Yeah, same mistake right there. Delete at. No implicit conversion of string into integer. Yeah, so that's the same problem that we had before, where we have to turn the user input, because when the user puts it into string, it's not an integer. Take. No implicit conversion of array into integer. Let's see. Huh. So it looks to me like looks to me like the method that we used to try to Oh, yeah, so this is an array, and take should just be an integer, so we just need to do a count. I think you can also do length. I think they do the same thing. Okay, that's bad. So I only wanted to give up one card, but it asked me to give up two cards. So, oh man, this is really wonky. Okay, it's not working at all. Oh man. Well, debugging is part of coding. So it looks like I'm putting in invalid numbers. So how many cards do you want to give up? One. Oh, I failed to iterate the count in the while loop. So it's just asking me to give up different cards. Oh, and that shouldn't be in the while loop either. So Control C out of that. I'm getting some imposter syndrome right now. Feeling some coding anxiety. Let's see. Dang. So I tried to install the Pry debugger. Um, but I couldn't install the Pry debugger, so I'm just gonna put in like some puts statements. Because something went wrong in here. Probably with the finish draw. Oh man. Oh, maybe I'm just printing it twice. Yeah, I was just printing it twice. There was no problem at all, actually. Whoops! False alarm. So giving up. So it deleted those two cards, but it didn't give me any new cards. And I learned in coding school if you ever don't know what to do, just put in a bunch of print statements and then I may have to do like cards equals old cards plus new cards. Because, you know, like maybe it's not modifying this variable. Yeah, that actually looks like it worked. Because we had the 10 of clubs and the 10 of diamonds. So we have a 5 card hand here, and it says the new cards were the 8 of spades and the queen of hearts. And it gave us the queen of hearts and the 8 of spades. So I think a lot more logic could go into this parsing and validating the user input, because there's a lot of things that the user could do that are going to make this break. Like, what if they put in the same number twice? It's gonna potentially throw errors. It could delete a card that they don't want to delete. Like if they put in 1 twice, then it would delete 1 and 2. And then if they put like 3 and 3, then it's going to delete, it's going to go outside of the array and try to delete a value in the array that isn't there. And I think that's going to throw an error. So, you know, I mean, it's just an exercise. It doesn't have to be perfect, but user input, especially when they do like inputs that are outside of the values that you want, that's definitely going to mess it up. Like, what if they just put in like a random string? Like, the code isn't going to know what to do with that. So probably you would make a function that would validate the user input, that would make sure that the user input was an integer and that the user input doesn't repeat, and that you know, if they wanted to give up 2 cards, that they would, you know, that it would ask them multiple times to make sure that it doesn't get added. So if they put in an invalid value, that it would reset, and then I would give them another chance to put in a valid value. I figure I'll show you what that looks like right now. Parse, well, validate, put. So I'm going to make this an instance variable so that we don't have to pass it. Well, actually, because we're using the same one up here, I can't use the find and replace. So up here, I'll just initialize it as an instance variable. And it won't affect anything going on in here, because even though it has the same name, this is within a local function inside a different class. So cards to discard right there. Cards to discard. So if can use an unless here. Unless is the opposite of if. So return unless input integer, and that's called a guard clause. So it exits out of that function if it isn't. So I'll just exit out before modifying the cards to discard. And then you also want to make sure that we don't already have that find value in array Ruby. We don't already have the value in the array, so they can't do it twice. Dot include. And they say that the reason why there's no S on include is because Mats is Japanese, and he didn't think about the subject of the verb. Include, yeah. So there you go. So now yeah, we actually don't even need the count. I don't know what I was doing with the count, because we did need the count before, but what we want to do is instead look at the length of the cards to discard. So dang, undefined method integer for the string. Check if is integer Ruby. Yeah, so if you put in 1 twice, it's just an infinite loop. So there's not like any feedback to the user, but it's still better than what we had. You can do a return of puts here in a 1 line. Sorry, I didn't understand that. Puts. You can't discard the same card twice. And then to use an apostrophe within a string, you have to exit it out like that, so it should work. I may want to put some like new lines, you know, in between here. So to do a new line, you can just do another puts. Then I would guess you can also do a puts down here. And that'll probably look better for the user. Nope, didn't put it where I wanted it to go. Oh well. I mean, I wanted the new line to be right here, but instead I did 2 new lines here, so let's just not sweat that for now. Yeah, so that's a good So that adds some useful validation for the user. The command line, let's see, so player hand.show hand for draw. Okay, so we don't have that validation for the how many cards do you want to give up. So we could also add validation there. Oh, and that didn't put it in the right place either. Yeah, I think that looks better. So that's what we wanted. Yeah. So this is like a good beginning to a poker game. But this isn't actually the most interesting part. And when I had to do this at a second boot camp that I went to, um, they just wanted us to score which is the winning hand in poker, which is probably more interesting than creating this command line interface, because I think there's some real logic to that. I actually I have to look up the winning hands in poker before I'm able to do that. So uh, I'll be back with you when I've done that. Cody the Coder, ready for action. Pause recording, Command Shift 2. That's going to come in handy because I'm also playing Settlers of Catan online at Catan Universe. Cool, so I have looked up the different winning hands of poker. So we have to implement a compare hands function. Hand 1, hand 2. The question is kind of what heuristic do we set up? Like, what's the most efficient way to find pairs and then find the same suit? Because the naive approach is to go in and do, is it a royal flush? No. Is it a straight flush? No. Is it a four of a kind? Yes. Is it a full house? No. And then you just go through all of the different ones. And there's got to be like some kind of efficiency in there, some kind of way to save time. For example, I don't think. No, no. I mean, maybe I should just use the naive approach. Yeah, whatever. Let's naive it up. We might even assign a point value to each of these different hands, and then we just assign the hand like a point value, so it would be like a dictionary. So it'd be like 1 royal flush, like a hash. But we'll come to that later. So we've got the hand. The hand has cards in it, and then the cards have the data structure of a value and a suit attribute. Yeah, so I was thinking about it, and I think it's best if we just write a function that will say, is it a straight, is it a flush? And then there should be one that like finds out how many pairs there are. and then based off of that, we can determine what it is. So the easiest one is going to be let's see. Yeah, so we don't need any of this. I'm going to put it in the hand class. Def rank hand. Is a flush. Ruby has a, if you have a function that will return a Boolean value, then they have, it's common practice to put a question mark at the end of it. So is a flush. Cards.select. So what we want to do is we just want to select the suit value of each card in the hand. And in Rails, if I were working with active record models, I'd use pluck for that. But I think we can do that with select. Card dot suit. Okay, yeah, so don't be shy about diving into the documentation. I kind of feel like a fraud because I had to Google that. I just figure it's just a couple, like you don't have to memorize anything in the modern day. So what I saw is that there's this function method called unique. And so this will, so this is going to select something like spades, hearts, clubs. And then we can just check if you do unique, it's going to filter that down to only the unique values. And if they're all the same suit value, then that means that the length of suits.unique should be 1 if it's a flush. If suits.unique dot length is greater than 1, return false. And then at the bottom you just put a true. And this is a way that I learned to code from Rubocop, which is it's like a style guide for Ruby code, and it always encourages you to use guard clauses like this, because the alternative to using this guard clause would be something like if suits.length is less than 1, return false, else return true. And then you have to get kind of this like if ladder, and not only is that harder to read, it's also more lines of code. So yeah, so I mean, let's just compare these two. I mean, which one do you like better? I mean, it's pretty obvious the one on the top is better. Anyway, and then of course in Ruby you don't have to explicitly return the last value. Is a flush. Then I can do is a straight, and then we can use the same select statement. Um, the only problem is Jack, King, and Ace. So Jack, Queen, King, Ace. So we're gonna have to like use kind of a dictionary in order. We're gonna have to translate those into certain values. We're gonna have to translate them all into 10, 11, 12, or 11, 12, 13, and then 14 or 1, which is going to require some thought. Well, that's kind of an edge case, and then the right approach is always, um, you think about the different kinds of data that your function will have to deal with, and then it's best to just work on the most common case first, and then work on the edge case last. So for now, let's just assume that they're all integers. So I think we're going to wind up with something like, and then we need to make sure that each one of these values is 1 greater than the previous value. So Ruby has a built-in sort. It's probably going to be more efficient than most sorts that you could write yourself. Ruby, even though Ruby isn't the most efficient language or the fastest language. Card values.sort. I think there would be a way to use like inject or something here. Like there would be a cool way to use inject and then perform a comparison on I could write it manually. Huh. Okay, that's pretty cool actually. So if you look at this example that I found and am copy pasting off Stack Overflow, which is supposed to mean you're a fraud, it's just checking that the first and the second, that the second is greater than the first. But we could actually probably change this conditional to make it does the second equal first plus 1. And then we're kind of getting into the weeds here, where these specific functions are getting kind of difficult to test. So I may write an RSpec test in order to test these two functions, or a couple RSpec tests. So card values dot first, second. Oh, we probably actually have to do this each const. Yeah, that's pretty important. So that shows that we're going to be iterating 2 elements at a time. I haven't seen that before, actually. Second equals first plus 1. So I think, yeah, these are built into this method of testing is built into the Ruby library. Um, but then here, if we use rspec, then we're going to be able to do we're going to be able to, it's, if you can tell, it's easier to debug because you have a description of what it's supposed to do. And then it's just also better organized than these asserts. So these asserts are, it's adding a little bit more overhead to the testing framework in order to keep things more organized and to give more meaningful feedback. Because otherwise it's just, the program is just going to fail on this line assert. But with rspec, we can also keep the testing environment. Yeah, I'm not sure if this is the way you're supposed to program, where you always copy paste something and then you repurpose it. But is a flush? Yeah, so let's test is a flush. And then here's something that we can do before we run the test suite. We don't need this first describe block because okay, cool. So now we're going to have to leverage our other functions. So we're going to have to instantiate the deck. So we're going to need access to a deck, and then we're also going to need access to the hand in order to get meaningful test data. So this is an example of how unit testing is going to help you to refactor and refine your code, because right now the deck that we have is it's stuck as an instance variable inside the poker initializer instead of being in its own class. So this is going to give us the opportunity to move it to its own class, deck. Yeah, it seems kind of stupid to have deck.deck, but we'll just call it deck.cards because they are cards. Actually pushing these values is kind of inefficient. I might want to like try to convert that into like a map. Convert those two for loops into maps because it's considered better style and it's more efficient than just pushing a bunch of values into a deck. And you know, I mean, that's feedback I've gotten at work many times when I've you know, written for loops. It's just considered bad style. So if you can ever use like a lambda, any kind of a lambda function, like oh, this is a lambda function, this is a lambda function. If you can ever use a lambda instead of a simple loop, it's just something you're supposed to do. There, it's just more efficient. So I may do that down the line. So cards. So then that's going to create, so that's going to isolate the logic for creating a deck. And then we're going to want to shuffle the deck after we've created it, which is conveniently named shuffle. Um, okay, yeah, so we're not really... I don't want to say anything that's inaccurate here. There's something. So my question is: are we now copying over a copy of the deck to the deck variable, or are we copying a reference to the deck variable or the cards variable within the deck into the Polkadot deck? And that's one of these like thorny Ruby problems because the answer in Ruby is that it's actually both. And talking about that is beyond my expertise. It is something I've worked with before, though. Okay, cool. So we've moved the deck logic into its own thing. So now we're going to be able to instantiate a deck down here. Deck.new.cards. And then we're going to create a player hand. Huh. Okay. I know let's just print out the player hand to make sure that everything's going according to plan. So we may need to include the RSpec library. RSpec Polkadot.rb. Okay, gem, sudo gem install RSpec. Dang. Yeah. Cody is not in the sudo. Oh man, poor Cody. Huh. So it looks like I'm using a version of Ruby from my other user. And dang. I'm kind of at a loss here. I think maybe I should install rbenv as Cody, because Cody is a second account on a computer. One second. This is beyond the scope of the tutorial. Cool. So everything worked out as I planned. The problem is that Kodi doesn't have permission to access the system Ruby, which is something that actually comes bundled with your MacBook, and it might use it for some other stuff, so it's best not to mess with it. So I used rbenv to install Ruby 2.6.3, which it downloaded using Homebrew, and then I tried to install RSpec and it still didn't work. So I ran which Ruby to see if I was using the new RBN Ruby, and I wasn't. So then you have to run this to add that to your bash profile. And then after I ran which Ruby, it showed that I was using RBN.
and then I was able to install RSpec. So then I ran the RSpec test, rspecpoker.rb, and okay, so this means that the game started. So I failed to comment out the line that was instantiating the poker game, but it did run the test the way that we wanted. So that means so far so good, and now we're ready to mm. Actually, we don't even want X. Okay, well the refactor with the deck that I used wasn't really even that useful. I mean, I guess it's like a good stylistic change, but we didn't need to do that at all. We just need to make some cards that are going to have the test values. So there's one card, the 5 of spades. So now we just need to make sure we have a 5-card hand. And then we just give like some random values here. Yeah, that's the way we spelled spades up there. So the player hand is actually going to be a new hand. It's going to look like that. I mean, it might be useful to be able to use the deck later on, you know, out of the context of the poker game, like if we wanted to write some tests for the deck itself. And this is something, when I was learning programming, that I thought was really weird, that you can put all of these like new lines in and then it doesn't change the code. But you do have to admit that it looks a lot better if you do this kind of stuff. So normally the rule is that you indent. Yeah, so hopefully that'll work. Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm able to do it like this, like if that would be considered proper style. And you also always have like Rubocop or something that's going to do this for you. But I'm going to call that good enough. So, okay, cool. So that shows that our test hand went through. But it still printed all that stuff, even though I commented out the poker, so I don't know where that's coming from. Because poker isn't getting initialized anywhere. Oh, that's... Okay, that's actually pretty ominous. Yeah, so what happened was kind of a dum-dum error where I had created this folder Ruby Games because I wanted to not put there's an invisible variable for RBEnv, or there's an invisible file that shows the Ruby version that you're using in that folder, and I didn't think it made sense to put that on my desktop, so I made that folder. But after I moved the file, Sublime still had a reference to the old directory of poker.rb. So when I was making changes in Sublime, it was creating a new poker.rb here instead of reflecting those changes in the file that I was running my code on. So didn't have anything to do with RSpec really. And puts hello, puts got here. You know, sometimes it's just useful to see if a block of code that you've written is getting run. It's not the most sophisticated way of analyzing that. The best way is to do binding.pry, which opens this really powerful debugger. But I am trying to, you know, give like a minimalistic tutorial here. So here's our test hand. So now we're ready to write the test. We can actually, so the test hand should be a flush. So we just call expect player. Let's call it flush hand. Oh, I didn't call the function. Is a flush. Huh. Yeah, so I made a big mistake here. I thought that select is more like a filter that will return if the block evaluates to true, then it will return that into the results array. It's not a select in, so it's kind of like a query. That's not what we wanted. I made a big mistake there. I didn't use select anywhere else. Okay, yeah, but changing it to map actually should work. Yeah, there you go. So yeah, map is kind of running the block on each element of the array, which is what we wanted. And let's see here. So now for the sanity check, we're going to change the test data to fail and make sure the test fails. Yeah, so that means it works. So we write a test case for the negative path also. So and then both of the tests should pass now. There you go. Yeah, so that's a pretty good introduction to more OOP, more managing data structures using lambdas, and also writing an RSpec test. So I may have overshot the mark a little bit and included some stuff that I wasn't planning on including, but yeah, I think that was still useful. I guess what I would do next is I would write tests for is it a straight, and then I would write something that would be able to find different pairs within the hand, and then after I would do that, I would write tests for is a straight, write function to find pairs within hand. Yeah, I mean, writing unit tests is just the fastest way to make sure that your code is doing what you expect it to do. Especially because otherwise, you know, like you would have to like fire up the game, you'd have to look at the hand, and then you'd have to call the function somewhere in here. And it's just so much more efficient to write tests that you can run. And of course, tests also protect you against making a mistake as you continue to add to the code base. I wonder if it's getting long enough to separate into separate files. I guess. Anyway, I might separate classes into separate files. Well, I don't want to go overboard. It's supposed to be like a one file thing. Write function to compare two hands against each other. Yeah, and then that would be probably in the player class, because then we have access to two hands. And then is there anything else I have to do? Straight? So for the straight, for dealing with the ace within straights, I think you would just like take the ace out and then see if it would form a straight with either a 1 or a 14, and then kind of run with that. And then we also have to, for all of these, you have to keep the, if there's a tie, right? If there's a tie, then you look at the high card, and then if the high card is also a tie, then you look at the next highest card and the next highest card. So resolving a tie is going to be a bit involved also. But, you know, if my goal is to write a working basic poker game, it's a team effort here. I'd say that we're over half done. So yeah, I think I'm gonna upload my videos to YouTube now and then see if I can get some viewers. I mean, I'm just working in a vacuum right now, right? So looking forward to getting your feedback.